The topic of discussion that we are going to have right now is we are going to talk about cranial nerve nuclei and columns. So now, okay, before getting into the topic, let's discuss about this nuclei and columns. Now, what are columns and what are nuclei? Simply, the columns are the collection of nuclei, right? The collection of nuclei, that's all. And what are the nuclei? And if we need to know about nuclei, what are nuclei? Nuclei are the collection of cell bodies. For example, what is this? These are, what are these? What are these? These are our cell bodies, right? Cell bodies. Okay, these are our axons, right? Axons. These are our cell bodies, and this down, what are these? Are axons. These, the collection of these are called our what? These are called nuclei, right? Nuclei. And this is called nuclei in the case of CNS. Now, but in the case of what? PNS, it is called what? It is called ganglion. Okay, ganglion. Okay, and these are also what? These are also our what? Gray matter, right? Gray matter. Now, why gray matter? Because they are not covered by what? They are not covered by myelination, right? Myelination. But here in axons, there are the covering of what? Myelin sheath, right? Myelin sheath. So, what are these? These are what? These, the collection of these axons. What are these? These are white matter. White matter. Okay, this was a bit introduction. Okay, what we are going to study in this chapter in cranial nerve nuclei and columns. The thing that we are going to discuss is we are going to understand about columns. We are going to talk about four efferent column, three efferent columns, right? We will be talking from developmental point of view, and what we will do is we will find out which nuclei is present in which part of brainstem. Okay, and these are the things that we will be discussing right now, right in this chapter. So now let's begin our discussion. So we'll begin with our neural tube. Now, talking about neural tube, right? Okay, during the time of development, what is going on is that there is what? This is our neural tube, right? As you can see, this is our neural tube, right? Now, inside we have got what? We have got the cap. Now, these neural tube are divided into two parts with the help of sulcus limitans, right? Limitans, it limits our this neural tube into two parts, right? Limitans. Now, it divides our neural tube into what? Alar plate and vessel plate. Now, this alar plate, what is this alar plate? The alar plate is sensory plate. It is present what? We can just imagine as what? We can imagine it as spinal cord also. Now, this alar plate, it is what? It is dorsally presented, right? Dorsally presented. And in spinal cord also, what is the dorsal? Okay, the dorsal root, they form what? They are sensory in nature. So here this alar plate is also what? It is sensory, right? It is sensory in nature, gives sensory nuclei. And talking about this basal plate, this is what? This is present ventrally. It is the ventral part, and it gives what? It gives motor nuclei, right? Nuclei. Okay, we can just correlate with the spinal cord, the same thing, right? Spinal cord. Okay, now moving further, what happens is that as development proceeds, right? As development proceeds, what will happen? It will give this structure, right? As development proceeds, right? The lateral wall move more laterally. That means the lateral wall, as you can see, these are the lateral wall. They move more laterally. As you can see, they are moving what? They are moving more laterally. And as a result, alar laminae, right? The alar plate or the alar laminae, what they will do is they will come what? They will come laterally, right? They are coming laterally. Now, here what happens? This structure will be formed like this. As a result, this alar plate, it will come laterally, right? And the middle, right? The basal plate, they will come medially. Okay, medially. Now here what happens is that now this alar plate and this basal plate, right? As I mentioned, this basal plate, right? What they are? They give motor nuclei. They give motor nuclei, and this alar plate, they give what? They give sensory nuclei. Okay. Now, talking about this, let's talk about this what? The alar basal plate that are giving motor nuclei, and talking about this, these are motor in nature. Yes, we know these are motor in nature, right? Now, so the column that are present right here are what? They are efferent, right? Efferent means motor in nature. Okay, here there are how many? Three type of columns. How many columns? Three type of columns, right? Okay, three efferent columns, or we can say motor columns. Now, what are these three efferent columns doing here? They are supplying what? They are supplying three different type of muscles. How many? Three types of muscles. Okay, now what are the three types of muscles? Okay, now to understand these three types of muscles, let's get into our this diagram. Okay, now talking about pharyngeal arches, right? Okay, now these pharyngeal arches, we know that how many pharyngeal arches is there? 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 is what it disappears, and 6 is there, right? Now this first arc, what it does is, this first arc, it is supplied by what? It is supplied by our trigeminal, or we can say mandibular. In trigeminal, the mandibular knob, right? It is supplied by mandibular knob. Okay, mandibular knob. Similarly, the second pharyngeal arc is supplied by what? It is written wrong right here. It is the facial, just 2, right? Facial, it is by 7 cranial nerve, the facial cranial nerve. Similarly, the third pharyngeal arc is supplied by what? It is supplied by glossopharyngeal, and our this 4th and 6th are supplied by our vagus nerve, right? Okay, now here in this mandibular nerve, what does mandibular nerve supply? It supplies the muscles of mastication. Similarly, the facial nerve supplies the facial muscles, right? Similarly, our this glossopharyngeal and our this vagus, what they supply, glossopharyngeal and vagus, what they supply is that the muscle of palate, pharynx and larynx, right? It is so important. Okay, all these muscles of mastication, muscles of face, muscles of palate, pharynx and larynx, what are these? These are all what? These are all our skeletal muscle, right? Skeletal muscles. These are skeletal muscles. Okay. Now what? These are skeletal muscles, and there are other skeletal muscles also, which are what? The somatic muscles. That means the muscles which are what? Derived from somites or somatomeres, right? Now these somatic muscles of head and neck, what are these? These are extraocular muscles and the hypoglossus muscles or tongue muscles. So under skeletal muscles, we studied about what? We studied about these pharyngeal arches muscles, pharyngeal arch derivative. What are these? Muscles of mastication, facial muscle, muscle of palate, pharynx and larynx. These are what? These are also skeletal striated muscles. Similarly, these somatic muscles, extraocular muscles and tongue muscles, these are also what? These are also skeletal muscles, right? Skeletal muscles. The difference is that these skeletal muscles are derived from pharyngeal arches, whereas the below one skeletal muscles are derived from what? These are derived from somatomeres and somites. From somites we have got tongue muscles, and from somatomeres we have got extraocular muscles. Okay, now these are two types of muscles. Now in skeletal muscles also we talked about two types of muscle. One muscle derived from somites or somatomeres, and another muscles derived from what? Pharyngeal arches. And obviously the another type is our what? The smooth muscles, right? Smooth muscles and glands. Okay, then okay, as we were talking, how many type of columns were there in efferent columns were there? There were 3 types of efferent columns, right? Now these 3 types, why these were 3 types? These were 3 types because they need to supply three types of muscles. What are the 3 types of muscles? One, the muscles from pharyngeal arches, right? The skeletal muscle from pharyngeal arches. The skeletal muscles derived from somatomeres or our somites. These are our what? Hypoglossus muscle and extraocular muscle, right? Extraocular muscles, the next type. And another is our what? Another is our smooth muscle and glands. Okay, these are the muscles that need to be supplied. Okay, now the most medially what we have got is one important thing to notice right here is all these are need to be what? Studied in order. The most medial is our what? This GSE. What is this? General somatic efferent. Now here talking about general somatic efferent. Now here general somatic, that means what? Somatic muscles, right? General sensation from somatic muscles. What are the somatic muscles? These are our extraocular muscle and tongue muscle. We are clear about that thing. We discussed this thing right here, right? Somatic muscles, extraocular and tongue muscles. Okay, now similarly, just lateral to this GSE, general somatic efferent, the another one is our special visceral efferent. Now here special visceral, here this visceral is a misnomer because here we are talking about what? We are talking about here we are talking about special, here in this special visceral efferent we are talking about the muscles from pharyngeal arches, right? The visceral here is misnomer. Okay, we are not talking about internal nerve structure. We are talking about what? We are talking about what? Pharyngeal arc muscles. Okay, now another is our what? This one, what is this? This is our general, right? Visceral efferent, general visceral efferent. Now here what is remaining, right? The remaining one is our smooth muscles and glands. Okay, we said that our this right, our this basal plate, basal lamina or basal plate, it consists of what? It consists of three types of efferent columns. Now three type of efferent column are what? To supply three types of muscles: general, what? Somatic efferent, supplying what? Extraocular muscle and tongue muscle. What is this? Special visceral efferent. Visceral efferent, it supplies what? Our pharyngeal arch. And our general visceral efferent, right? These are what? These are supplying what? Our smooth muscles and glands. So this is it. Now moving further, moving further, in alar plate, what we have is we have four, right? Four what? Efferent columns. Now four efferent columns. Now how are these arranged? These are arranged what? As a continuation. For example, what we had the laterally, what we have laterally in our this efferent column, we had general visceral efferent, right? General visceral efferent. Similarly, what we have here, we have general visceral efferent, right? Visceral efferent. These are all the efferent, right? These are sensory in nature, as we have mentioned, that's alar plate, right? These what? These develops sensory nuclei. Okay, yes, HGVE, it also here it provides GVA, general visceral what? Efferent. Similarly, as SVE, we have got SVA, right? What? Special visceral efferent. Similarly, as GSE, we have got what? GSA, right? General somatic efferent. And at last, the new one, right? That wasn't in our basal plate, that is our special sensory efferent. So now how we are going to study these things? Now here what is going on is, now let's talk about what? GVA, general visceral efferent. Now what? Okay, just above we talked what? We talked about smooth muscle and gland, but here it does not work like this. So here we need to completely forget what we have studied earlier. So let's not what? Let's not relate to our this efferent part. So in this GVA, what we need to know here is, okay, in this GVA, what we need to know here is, we need to what? We need to talk in two ways. One, the type of sensation it is carrying, such as general sensation it is carrying. Now another, from where it is carrying. It is carrying from what? Viscera, right? Viscera. Now such as, now it will what? It will carry sensation, general sensation from viscera. That's all. Okay. Now another is our special visceral efferent. Now here special. Now what type of sensation it will carry? It will carry the special sensation. Now special sensation, what are the special sensation? Obviously our olfactory, vision, taste are our special sensation, but here the special sensation is being carried by what? Viscera, right? From viscera. And here the visceral sensation, here it means what? These viscera should be what? Endodermal in derivation. That means special sensation should come from viscera that is endodermal in derivative. Okay. Now here in this special visceral efferent, the special sensations should come from what? Endodermal derivative, that is our taste. That means out of three, taste, olfactory and vision, the taste is only received by our this SVA column, right? Taste is only received by our this SVA column. Similarly, talking about GSA, what is this GSA? General what? Somatic efferent. Now here that means it is coming it is receiving general sensation from what? From our what? The somatic what? The body wall, right? From our body wall. Okay. Now talking about special sensory efferent. Okay, as we talked about what? We talked about special visceral efferent. What was special visceral efferent? Was taste. Similarly, special what? Somatic efferent. That means here visceral, out of olfactory, optic, so out of what? Olfactory, vision and taste. The taste was from our endodermal derivative, but here from somatic it is talking about from body wall. Somatic, that means from ectoderm and mesoderm, right? Ectoderm derivative, yes, also from mesoderm. The remaining are our what? Olfaction, right? Olfaction, vision, hearing and balancing. Okay, hearing and balancing. Now talking about this olfactory, right, and optic or vision, these are having no nuclei. That means they will directly what? They will directly send their impulse through nerve fibers. They do not have the collection of cell bodies within them. So olfaction and olfactory and vision, or we can say cranial number 1 and 2, these are what? These are having no nuclei. But our this hearing and balance, right? Hearing and balance, these are done by what? Vestibular nerve and cochlear what? Cochlear, vestibulocochlear, right? Nucleus. These are having nucleus, that is vestibular and cochlear nucleus, right? Okay, so this was what this was about our these, right, our these general what knowledge about all these things. Now what we'll do is we'll look toward what we'll look toward the what we'll look toward individual columns, as you can see individual columns, and we'll look toward nucleus, right, nucleus as you can see in this diagram, and the location of nucleus in the various brainstem. What are these? These are our brainstem. So talking about what the first one, general what somatic efferent, right? If you remember in general somatic efferent, what we said, general somatic efferent, we said that these will what this will this will supply what our extraocular muscle, right, extraocular muscle and our hypoglossus muscle. Now talking about extraocular muscle, if you remember in eye, extraocular muscle are supplied by third cranial nerve, right, third cranial nerve, except lateral rectus, right, which is supplied by sixth cranial nerve, right, and another superior oblique muscle which is supplied by fourth cranial nerve. So that means the extraocular muscles are supplied by third, fourth and sixth, right? And here in general what somatic efferent, we said that these are what these are, as you okay, if you will recall, right, these general somatic efferent, this supplies what, this supplies extraocular muscle and tongue muscle. Extraocular muscle, as I have already said, the third, right, fourth, sixth are the muscle, are the nerve supplying extraocular muscle. And talking about tongue, it is supplied by what, hypoglossus nerve. So here third, fourth, sixth, and we have got what, hypoglossus, 12th cranial nerve. So talking about their nuclei, right, where they are present. Now this third one, third and fourth, these are present in medulla oblongata, right. Similarly the fourth one, they are present on pons, and 12th, right, hypoglossus is present in medulla oblongata. So this is important to know about the location of various nuclei. Now talking about what, talking about our special visceral efferent. Now if you remember, special visceral efferent are supplying the muscles from pharyngeal arches. Now talking about the muscles of pharyngeal arc, what are these? These are supplied by our what, mandibular nerve, right, mandibular nerve, the branch of trigeminal nerve, right, and its nuclei is present in pons, right. Similarly what we have, okay, the mandibular nerve, it is present where, mandibular nerve, the branch of trigeminal nerve, it is present in the area of pons. Similarly talking about what, this is not 8, this is 7, right, the facial nerve, it is also present in the area of pons in midbrain. And talking about what other what, yes, we talked about 9th, that was supplying third part of pharyngeal arc, and we talked about 10, that that supplied that supplied what, that supplied the pharyngeal arc, our 4 and 6, right. Similarly we have got 11 also. Now all these three together, they are called nucleus ambiguus, right, nucleus ambiguus. Okay, now the muscle of palate and pharynx, we are not talking here about larynx, these are supplied by what, these are supplied by cranial accessory nerve, these are supplied by cranial accessory nerve. And accessory nerve also, we have two parts, cranial, but out of that two part, these are palate and pharynx, these are supplied by cranial superior cranial accessory nerve. Now these cranial accessory nerve are supplied, these are supplied by cranial accessory nerve with through what, through our vagus nerve. Now what is this called? This is called Hitchhike phenomenon, right, Hitchhike phenomenon. Now what is this? This is the condition in which one nerve go with another to get into destination. That means one nerve takes helps of another nerve with to get into destination. That means here this palate and pharynx, these are supplied by what, these are supplied by cranial accessory nerve. But this cranial accessory nerve, what it will do is it will follow the path of our this vagus nerve and it will supply them. So here these are supplied by cranial accessory nerve, but through what, through vagus nerve. And this is also called our VSC. What is this VSC? This is vago-accessory complex. Why vago-accessory complex? Because vago, vagus nerve, and accessory, our cranial accessory nerve. That's all. Okay. Now here what will happen if there will be injury in this region? If there will be injury in this region, that means in the place of our nucleus ambiguus, what will happen is that since this nucleus ambiguus, what it denotes? It denotes the cranial nerve number 9, 10, 11, right? Now these 9, 10, 11, what they are responsible for? These 9, 10 and 11, these are responsible for supplying what? Palate, pharynx and also larynx. Now if there will be injury in these, what will happen? these nerve will not what supply the region of our palate, pharynx and larynx, because of which there will be ipsilateral bulbar paralysis, right? Ipsilateral bulbar paralysis, but the tongue muscles will be spared because here there is no damage to our 12th cranial nerve, right? Hypoglossal nerve. So there will be ipsilateral bulbar paralysis, but tongue will be spared, and also there will be loss of gag reflex. Okay, now moving further, what we have is we have what general visceral efferent column. Now in this column, what we can see is here in same position as of third cranial nerve, what we can see, Edwinger nucleus, right? Edwinger Westphal nucleus, and in the place of our bones we can see what, superior salivary nucleus and inferior salivary nucleus. Similarly in medulla oblongata, what we got dorsal nucleus of vagus nerve. Now why the name dorsal nucleus of vagus nerve? It is called because it is present dorsal in brainstem, right? Now here if you will see this 10th, right, vagus nerve is only the nerve, right, that will go beyond head and neck. That means it will go and supply what? It will go and supply smooth muscle and gland in thorax and abdomen, right? This thorax and abdomen. Okay, now let's talk about GVE, right? GVE. Now talking about GVE, what we have got is, okay, we got EW nucleus, right? Now talking about this EW nucleus, now what is this? Edinger Westphal nucleus, right? Now what it will do is it will go with what? Third cranial nerve, as it is present in the position of third cranial nerve. It will go with third cranial nerve, okay, we can precisely what we can say is it will go with nucleus of third cranial nerve, and it will supply what? Sphincter pupillae and ciliaris. Now what about dilatory pupillae? It is supplied by sympathetic, right? Sympathetic. Okay, now and talking about superior salivatory nuclei, it is what? Going with our what? It is going with our which nerve? It will go with our 7th, okay, it is written 8th, but it is going with our 7th nuclei, cranial nerve nuclei, and it will go and supply what? The inferior glands such as submandibular, sublingual and lacrimal gland, right? The name is superior salivatory nuclei, but it will supply what? The glands which are present below, right, lower, such as submandibular, sublingual and lacrimal gland. And talking about inferior salivatory nuclei, it will supply what? It will go with what? 9th cranial nerve, right? 9th cranial nerve, and what it will do is it will supply the gland which is present superiorly, that is parotid gland. Okay, now talking about what? Dorsal nuclei of 10. Yes, we talked about why it is called dorsal, because it is present in dorsal in brainstem. It will cut it and we'll see it in dorsal aspect, it is present. Now yes, we said that 10th vagus nerve is only the nerve that is going beyond head and neck, and it will supply smooth muscles and gland in thorax and abdomen. Okay, now right, now here 4 cranial nerve nuclei in GVE, right, general visceral efferent, these GVE. Now these 4 cranial nerve nuclei in GVE, right, GVE column supplies different smooth muscle and gland, right? These are supplying what? Different gland, right, glands and smooth muscles also, right, smooth muscle. But except these other 8 nerves are not what? They are not showing any interest in our these smooth muscles and gland. So since we know here, if you just look carefully, then you will find that what are the nerve nuclei that they are going with? They are 3, 7, 9 and 10, right? And if you recall the fact, right, about parasympathetic outflow, then you will find that these are craniosacral outflow. Now talking about this cranial, what are the cranial region that it will come out? These are 3, 7, 9 and 10, right? Talking about sacral, these are S2 to S4. So since these are similar, right, what we can say is these 3, 7, 9 and 10, these are, we can call them as what? Parasympathetic nucleus also. Okay, now Now similarly, now sometime there may be questions such as which column is called parasympathetic column. Now at that time what we will say, obviously GVE, right, GVE, general what, visceral efferent column. Okay, now as we are talking about parasympathetic outflow, let's talk about what this thoracic thoracolumbar outflow also, that is sympathetic outflow, that is what, T1 to L2, right. Now yes, we talked about what, we talked about these, right, we talked about efferent columns, 3 efferent columns, right. The first one that are what, that are responsible for supplying somatic muscles of, so for example extraocular muscles, and then what we have one extraocular muscle, and we have what, hypoglossus supplying tongue. Similarly we have got special visceral efferent that are what, derivative of pharyngeal arch, that are supplying the derivative of pharyngeal arch. Similarly we have got general visceral efferent, these are responsible for supplying glands, right, glands and our what, smooth muscles. Now talking about efferent efferent columns, 4 efferent columns, but we will keep what, these two, GVA and SVA together, and we will be what, talking individually about GSA, SSA, general visceral efferent and special visceral efferent. Now talking about this general visceral efferent and special visceral efferent, the thing that we need to know here is, right, now now here these GVA and SVA, they contains what, only single nucleus. Since it consists only single nucleus, it is called what, it is also called nucleus of tractus solitarius. Now this single nucleus, right, this single nucleus is also divided into 2 parts. One is what, the cranial part, and one is caudal part. The cranial part is what it is doing, it is responsible for SVA, right, receiving sensation, special visceral efferent, right, special visceral efferent. Okay, and the lower caudalmost part is responsible for GVA, general visceral efferent. Okay, special and general, right, these are what, these are, okay, for example let's say there is our glossopharyngeal nerve that is supplying posterior 1/3 of tongue. Now these glossopharyngeal, what it does is it takes general sensation also, and it takes what, our special sensation of taste also. Now what it will do is, as it is supplying posterior glossopharyngeal is supplying posterior 1/3 of tongue, it takes general sensation as well as taste sensation. Now after taking taste sensation or general sensation, okay, let's say it is a tongue, right. Now the posterior how much, posterior our 1/3 of tongue, now it is what, it is taking what, taste sensation also, and after taking taste sensation, what it will do, it will just go and supply to what, our this special visceral efferent, and it will carry what, it will carry general sensation also, and it will go and carry it to what, our general visceral efferent. So there are 2 sides in this nucleus of tractus solitarius, and this is how it works, right. Okay, we talked about what, GSA, general sensory efferent, right, sorry, we talked about general visceral efferent and special visceral efferent. Now let's talk about what, general what, somatic efferent. Now talking about this general somatic efferent, now here yes, it will carry general sensation from somatic, right, body wall muscles. Now what is going on is, now here we have got the nucleus of cranial number 5, cranial number 5, that is trigeminal only. It is a huge nucleus, right. The upper one, the one present in midbrain, is long, slender, and in bone it gets enlarged, right, it enlarges, and again it gets narrower in the region of medulla oblongata. It is a huge nuclei because it is formed by forming other nuclei also. Now talking about this GSA, right, GSA, okay, now this is one part, this is another part, and this is another part. Now in this GSA, what you need to know is, right, this is a trigeminal nuclei overall. Now in this trigeminal nuclei, this upper part, what is this called, the one that is present in close to our this midbrain. The another name, what is the another name from midbrain, that is mesencephalon. So this part is called mesencephalon, right, or we can say mesencephalic nucleus, cephalic or mesencephalic nucleus. And here this one, the one present in pons, this is called what? This is called our principal or chief sensory nuclei. Similarly, the one that is present in medulla oblongata, and it will go till what? Till C2 level. C2 level. So it is called what? It is called spinal nuclei. Spinal nuclei. Okay, now let's go into it in detail. Yes, we talked about what? We talked about mesencephalic nucleus, we talked about principal or chief sensory nucleus, and spinal nucleus. Now these have what? These have their one characters, such as some, what will this mesencephalon nuclei do? It will carry what? It will carry the sensation or information of our what? Proprioception. Similarly, principal or chief sensory nuclei, it will carry sensation of touch and pressure. Similarly, spinal nuclei, it will carry sensation of pain and temperature. Now, as I have said, or this spinal nuclei is so long that it will extend up to C2 level, right? It is present in pons also. Some part is present in pons, in medulla oblongata, in upper part of spinal cord also. Okay. Now here the above part of our this spinal nuclei, that is our cranial part, above part, this may also carry the sensation of touch and pressure. This is one important point to know. Now here what we have is, we have three different nuclei. Why three different nuclei? Because these three different nuclei, what they have to do is, they have to carry three different informations, right? Proprioception, touch, pressure, pain and temperature. Now when we compare head and neck with rest of the body, at that time what we will find is, in rest of the body what we have different tracts, such as dorsal column tract, spinothalamic tract, spinocerebellar tract. Now all these different tracts are responsible for different information, right? For example, some are responsible for touch, pressure, pain, temperature. These have got their one functions. But in head and neck, what is going on is this trigeminal nuclei, right, is responsible for carrying what? It is responsible for carrying everything, right? The sensation of what? The sensation of our what? The pain, touch, pressure and everything. So it is important to know that what? The trigeminal nucleus is responsible for performing function of all the tracts in our body. So this was about our what? General somatic efferent column. Now talking about special sensory efferent. What is going on here is, now this special somatic efferent, it is responsible for what? It is responsible for what? Our this vestibulo and cochlear function. So it have got what? It have got two nuclei. One is vestibular nuclei, this one, and the one is cochlear nuclei. These are present at the level of our what? Pontomedullary junction, right? At the level of pontomedullary junction, as you can see. So this was about what? This was about put columns and nucleus within it and their position in brainstem. Hope you are clear with it. Thank you and have a great time.